check, check. Check, check. You got a green light?
Check, 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 yep. Check.
Are you plugged in properly?
Yep.
It's always the wire.
Are we on back there? Are you on?
I'm on. Check, check, check.
Yep. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. 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 I mean, a battery on. Check, check, check. Do you have another one?
I do.
mic?
I'll get it.
Thanks.
Why don't you play while you're on doing this? Here, try this one.
How'd you do that? Can you make it a little lower? Check it, check it, check it, check, check. You may want to even go lower, but okay.
For some reason the fader was down.
Yada bim,
Yada bum,
yada bim,
bada bum,
yada bim bum bim bum bim bum, yada bim,
bada bum,
yada bim,
bada bum.
yada bim bum bim bum bim bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. I chitty 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 bum. Yada bim,
Bada bum,
yada bim,
bada bum,
yada bim bum bim bum bim bum. Yada bim,
bada bum,
yada bim,
bada bum.
yada bim bum bim bum bim bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. I chitty 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 bum. It's Purim week. Yada bim,
Bada bum,
yada,
bada bum,
yada bim bum bim bum bim bum.
bada bum,
Yada bim,
bada bum.
yada bim bum bim bum bim bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. I chitty 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 bim bum bum. It's Shabbos. I chitty 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 bum. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Just want to make sure everybody has a handout handy because we're going to be using it a number of times during the service. There are more handouts than people, so I know there's enough. Want to welcome everybody in YouTube land. Hope to see you back here soon, especially as we're starting Onegs. Yes. And Shabbat shalom to all of us. It's a beautiful day. Did anybody get outside?
Yeah.
All right. Karen, would you usher Shabbat with a reading on page 3 and help us bring in some light? Pick whichever one speaks to you. Get your mic.
As the Sabbath candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us, as their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light. So may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Mm-hmm. Stay with me. go to seminary for. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos. We turn to page 5. And between light and sweetness, that's the beautiful setup for sacred time. Kiddush on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon himchilanu zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit ki hu yom tehila l'mikra'e kodesh zecher litziat mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim Shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen. Chaim. So, we're small, but does everybody know everybody else? If we did like a name quiz, would everybody pass the name quiz? All right, so let's get up and make sure that we know everybody's name. So, Seth, introduce yourself to Elia, Karen, Tom, Glenn, Elia. Yeah, it's kind of criminal to be in such a small group and not know everybody, right? Especially on Shabbos. Especially since we've been locked up for the last 2 years. Well, a good reason to remind, absolutely. Now we can say shalom to our better angels. Page 24, Shalom Aleichem.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharei, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Bohem LeShalom, Malachei Hashalot, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Blessing.
Baruchuni LeShalom, Malchei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mimelech, Malchei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Go in peace.
צאתכם לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Sing and joy here. Finger in page 44, last paragraph on page 13. Yismechu hashamayim,
השמיים,
Yismechu hashamayim,
השמיים,
Yismechu hashamayim, v'tagel haaretz. Sing that one with us. Yismechu hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, Yismechu hashamayim, v'tagel haaretz. Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, umelo. Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, Yiram hayam, umelo. 44. Yismechu v'malachutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, shomrei, shomrei, shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Mekadeshei, Mekadeshei Shvi Shabbat, Kulam Yisbehu V'yitangu metuvecha Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. V'hashvi ratzita bo v'kidashto Shabbat. Chemdan yamim oto karata Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Zecher l'maseh v'reishit Shabbat. Zecher l'maseh v'reishit Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei oneg Shabbat. Yismechu v'malachutecha, Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat. Oh, breathe out that week. V'korei oneg Shabbat. Source of all, Eternal One, we are bound with very tight knots. Oh my. Those knots, they choke off air and stop our blood from flowing freely. Those knots, they make us like computers, carefully controlled circuitry. They tie our brains, they tie our creativity, they tie our link with you. We might follow those knots around in all their intricacy, but it remains a knot. These knots in our hearts keep us from crying and dancing when we long to. They tie us to the posts of fences that separate us from each other. Those knots in our muscles, they keep our chests tight, our teeth clenched, our jaws locked, our legs crossed, our shoulders stooped, our backs bent. Oh God, untie those knots. They stop us from inhaling the full sweetness of life's breath. God, untie these knots. Anna v'choach gdulat yamincha tatir zerura. Anna v'choach gdulat yamincha tatir zerura. Treat this chant like a body scan. Find and loosen those knots. Anna v'choach gedulat yamincha tatir tzerura. Anna v'choach gedulat yamincha tatir tzerura. Baruch Shem kivod malchuto leolam va'ed. Baruch Shem kivod malchuto leolam va'ed. Anna v'choach gedulat yamincha tatir tzerura. Page 20. Greet light, greet sweetness, greet beauty, greet that expansiveness, and invite that free flow of presence.
Yada da 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 lecha dodi, yada da 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 lekat kala, yada da 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabel, yada da 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 lecha dodi, yada da 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 lekat kala, yada da 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 b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad ishmi'anu el ha'meuchad Adonai echad u'shmo echad l'shem u'tiferet velitila yararai
Yada-da-da-da, lecha dodi, yada-da-da-da, lekat kala, Yadadadadai b'nei Shabbat.
B'nei Shabbat
לקראת שבת, לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה מה שובך תחילה, תחילה, ידעי, ידעי לך דודי, ידעי לקראת כלה, ידעי בני שבת, בני שבת נקרא בלה.
Fifth stanza. התעוררי, כי באורך ומאורי, אורי, אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני, עלייך נגלה, ירדאי, ירדאי לך דודי, ירדאי לקראת כלה, ירדאי בני שבת, בני שבת נקרא בלה. Please rise if you're able. Face the door. Ninth stanza.
בואי בשלום עטרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצהולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה, ירדאי, ירדאי לך דודי, ירדאי לקראת כלה, ירדאי בני שבת, בני שבת נקרא.
Please remain standing, face the ark, page 28, the Baruch. Without the cell phone this time, our call to prayer. Yai, nai, nai, yai, nai, 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 yai, nai, 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 yai, nai, 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 yai, nai, 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 yai, nai, 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 Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vahed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vahed. Yai nai nai, yai nai nai nai, yai nai 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 nai. Sacred words, even the evenings. Wisdom opens gates wrapped around our hearts. Shebidvaro mahari varavi, הפותח שערים.
Evening, the evenings, evening the frayed edges of our lives. Mariv, Arabim, Amen.
Understanding alters with the times, changing seasons, cycles divine. Vitbuna mishanei itim, umachalif et hazmanim. Evening, the evening,
Evening the frayed edges of our lives. Mariv, Arabim, Amen.
Paint diamonds on the canvas called sky. Soothe our souls with a lilting lullaby. Oh, Mesaderet HaKochavim, Mishmorotehem B'rakia Kirtzono.
Evening, the evening, evening the frayed edges of our lives. Mariv, Arabim, Amen.
Rolling, rolling into the night, rolling, rolling away the light. El or mipnei hoshech, vehoshech mipnei or.
Evening, the evening, evening the frayed edges of our lives. Mariv, Arabim, Amen.
Spirit of the night, we bless your name. Eternal light, eternal flame. El Chai v'Kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed.
Evening, evening, evening the frayed edges of our lives. Mariv, Arabim, Amen. Mariv, Arabim, Amen.
We are loved,
Love, love, by an unending love, an unending love. We are loved, love, love, by an unending love, an unending love.
We're embraced by arms that find us, even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us, even when we're too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us, even when we're too embittered to hear. We are loved,
Love, love, by an unending love, an unending love.
we are loved, loved,
Love, love, by an unending love, an unending love.
We're supported by hands that uplift us, even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us, even when we're too weak for meeting. We are loved, loved by an unending love, an unending love. We are loved, loved by an unending love, an unending love. Embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled. Ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. We are loved, loved by an unending love, an unending love. We are loved, loved by an unending love, an unending love. And it's that one unending love. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha uv'lechtecha b'derech uv'shachbecha uv'kumecha ug'shartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu l'totafot b'neinecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uv'hisharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen. Let's all read together in 37 in the English. Love your God with every heartbeat, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work, whether you're tired or you're rested. Let them guide the work of your hands. Keep them in the forefront of your vision. Do not leave them at the doorway of your house or outside your gate. They're reminders to do all of my mitzvot, so that you can be holy for God. I am Adonai, your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai, your God. Emet ve'amunah. All this we hold to be true and trustworthy for us, that you alone are our God, and we are Israel, your people. And Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang to you together, lifting their voices joyously, as we do now on page 40. Micha Mocha, who's like you?
מי כמוך בעלים אדוני, מי כמוך נר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף פלא, נורא תהילות אוסף פלא, מלכותך רב בניך, בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה לי אנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ידעי 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 ונאמר כי פדה אדוני יעקב וגלו מי החזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני
ברוך הוא ברוך שמו
גאל ישראל.
Amen. 42 Ashkifenu Adonai Eloheinu. Oh, grant this, O God, that we lie down in peace.
ברוך אתה אדוני הפורה סוכת שלום.
And raise us up, our guardian, to life renewed.
שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל.
Spread over us the shelter of that beautiful peace.
ועל ירושלים
Guide us with your good counsel.
ועל כל עמו.
For your name's sake, be our help.
ועל ירושלים שלום.
Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings.
ועל ירושלים
Defend us
ועל כל עמו.
against enemies, illness,
ועל ירושלים שלום.
famine, sorrow.
ברוך אתה אדוני הפורה סוכת שלום.
Distance us from wrongdoing.
שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל.
For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful.
שלום עלינו
Guard our going,
ועל כל
our
עמו
coming,
ישראל.
to life and to peace evermore. May it be so. Invite us all, please, to rise for the Amidah on page 46, where we just begin simply by asking the words, to find the words, even if they don't come in words. Yananai, 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 Adonai. Yananai, 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 Sfatai Tiftach. Yananai, 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 Ufi Yagid. Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Yananai, 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 Adonai. Yananai, 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 Sfatai Tiftach. Yananai, 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 Ufi Yagid. Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Ve'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Ve'Koneh HaKol Bezocher Chasdei Avot V'Imaot ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים. צומח נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומידו מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה. ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יעללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Please continue your Amidah prayer privately between pages 54 and 60, or the text of your heart, until you've said what you've needed to say, and then take a seat. מקדש השבת, רצה אדוני אלוהינו ביום חסר, תפילתם באהבה, תהי רצון תמיד ותתיס. מודים אנחנו לך שאתה אדוני אלוהינו ולאבי אבותינו לעולם ועד. שלום רב על ישראל המכסים לעולם, כי אתה המלך אדם לכל השלום, תמינך לברך את ברוך אתה אדוני say shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru na 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 Oh, say shalom bimroma. Oh, yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru Amen. The one who makes peace above. Oh, let that peace flow down to us, all over Israel, your people, your world, and all your people all over the world, and let us say, Amen. Page 253, Mishaberach L'cholim, prayers for healing of body, spirit, psyche, self, relationship, energy.
Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor Abracha Le'imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
This week we're especially praying for Millie Rottenberg, Howard Simon, Gloria Berkowitz, Gittel Bat Chana, Bernice Portney, Beryl Ben Sima V'Shmuel Leib, Steve Gellis, Shalom Avram Ben Golda Yeshayahu, Myrtle Cupid, Michael Rosenblum, Harav Miriam Yael Chaya Bat Sarah Yitzchak, Maxwell Zwain, Menachem Mendel Ben Yehudit Michael, Dora Mansurate, Jeff Galvani, Dr. Isoka Nosamwota, Alan Mentha, Alon Ben Jewel Vagi, Marlon Williams, Eric Rivchin, Ian Gold, Tyler Stein, Chaim Tzvi Ben Moshe Hillel V'Nechama, Lisa Korn, Leah Razel Ben Malka V'Label, Gabriel Medalitza, Gavriel Yehoshua Ben Yehuda V'Chana, and Megan Howard Novak. To these names we add
Mishaberach Imotenu Mekor Abracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
speedily and uneventfully, full refuah shlema. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
We're doing something a little different tonight. Something fun. For me, hope for you. So on Wednesday night, Most of us are here, many of us are here. We took a Jewishly mandated break from the serious pain in the world. Thank God. This break, by the way, is a serious mitzvah. Judaism understands that as humans, we cannot survive on an unbroken wave of tragedy, worry, and suffering. Tom was amazing as Haman, and very timely in his Putin mask, hamming it up. Kosher ham, of course. Clearly, he is the Haman, not Tom, the other one. He is the Haman and the Amalek of our time, of our day, Putin. His kind of authoritarianism and unchecked ability to unleash bloodshed and suffering on millions of people will chew us up and spit us out if we let it. We've seen this before. And we're all watching in horror. We're all watching in horror, and for the most part, we feel helpless. And this is the place from which I'd like us to have a conversation, really a conversation. Because that helplessness and fear can so easily and quickly cloud more normally rational minds. And I was thinking about this sense of helplessness, just watching all of this horror unfold. When I started reading a dialogue that came over one of the several rabbinic Jewish listservs that I'm part of, someone on this listserv started a thread demanding that American Jews take a stand against Israel and what they saw as an Israeli ethical breach for limiting, yes, even halting, potentially, the number of non-Jewish Ukrainian refugees. And this started a pile-on avalanche of criticism of Israel's policy and action, which is predictable, not uncommon. It's not a secret that loving and supporting Israel is not without its challenges and its disappointments. But immediately after the criticism, or along with it, one voice was sort of piled on top of the other, came not only some very serious global perspective, but quotes of ethical treatises that I brought today for us to look at from our Jewish tradition. And these ethical teachings did what the serious study of all Jewish texts do, all Jewish ethical texts. They make the question and the answers more complex, and certainly not as simple as we would like, right? We all want to say, just end it. Just, stop him. Just, we want simple answers, but they don't come so simply. So I thought I would bring some of these ethical texts tonight, and we could talk about them and perhaps even apply them to the world at large today in a conversation and talk about that, and maybe even apply them to our own individual lives. But first, I just want to throw out some facts that was part of this whole discussion, thanks to Professor Google this morning. Somewhere around 3.5 million people have fled the Ukraine in the last about 4 weeks. 3.5 million people. This is the biggest refugee crisis in Europe since World War II. Most of these 3.5 million people have naturally found themselves in countries nearby, ostensibly where there's potentially family, friends, a linguistic or a cultural connection. So far, the United States has admitted several hundred people. No serious action has been made here to take more, although the administration does say they are open to it, and plans without any details. So where are these 3.5 million people going? Almost 2 million of them have gone to Poland. Not a surprise, European Union, those people, they want out of the sphere of Russian influence. Others have fled to Romania, almost 500,000, Moldova, about 350,000, Hungary, about 300,000, Slovakia. Interestingly, 168,000 have gone to Russia. That was a really interesting number. And 2,000 to Belarus. Israel, which is 2,000 miles away, which is even further away from Ukraine than London is, for example, has so far received over 12,500 Ukrainians. And as has always been the case, any Jew from anywhere in the world does not arrive in Israel as a refugee. They arrive immediately accepted for full citizenship. What other country in the world does that? The same goes for their immediate relatives, even if they're not Jewish. So of those 12,500 that have already arrived in Israel, they're expecting a lot more, only 3,500 of those who have arrived are Jews. So the rest of them, about 8,000 so far, are considered refugees, in the same way they would be for any other country that has people coming from fleeing war. 200,000 Jews are estimated to live in the Ukraine, so that means Israel would be, by law and by tradition, prepared to offer each and every one of them immediate citizenship and sanctuary. So that's a huge number. To be fair, according to reports, 290 people were denied entry to Israel for some reason. I don't know what they are. In the last few weeks, 290. There are active discussions in Israel about how, when, and if to cap the number of refugees who would not be eligible automatically for citizenship, as we would hope and expect and completely relate to some in Israel who want to welcome all, and others feel limits are appropriate. Sound like a familiar debate in a country? Yes, I think so. Just to compare, Israel is about 8,000 square miles, about the size of New Jersey. Israel's population is 9.5 million. Interesting to note that of that 9.5 million, 1.6 million Israelis are from the former Soviet Union, most of them from Russia or Ukraine. So if you think about the size of New Jersey, right, us absorbing close to 200,000 people would be a thing. So if you hear me, I really do get upset when the first fingers of unfairness automatically get pointed at Israel. It seems like when it comes to Israel, all perspective seems to get lost. With a trickle of a few hundred Ukrainians American, how any Jew could spend more energy criticizing Israel than questioning our own country, I do not understand. And I feel that this is a question that we have to consistently ask with Israel in the news. Because why should we ask any more of Israel than we ask of any other country, especially our own? Because the truth is, nobody wants to boycott or question America's right to exist because of our racial and national tensions, even though that seems to be fair game for Israel. It all needs to be addressed, but it all needs to be addressed proportionally. But I needed to get that off my chest. It's not what I want to talk about. But I think it's just such an important point. What I have are some Jewish textual sources that address the limits of giving, right? We all want to do, we all want to give, right? But whether it's opening our doors to refugees from Ukraine or Afghanistan or Syria or Central America, right? While these people need our help, and while many of us feel that the right thing to do is just to give and to do for those who need our help, and while our texts support this, they also offer boundaries and nuance to the question of how much, when, is there a limit, to what cost, and what might those limits be? Okay, so I've got a bunch of texts. And I thought we'd read them. We might not have the energy for all of them, but I got excited, so I brought a lot. Okay, so Seth, you want to read the first one out loud?
You shall not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor.
Great. So this comes right from Torah. What does this say to you?
When your neighbor is suffering, you shouldn't ignore it.
Right, right. Don't just stand there and go, oh, look, he's bleeding, right? We're called to don't just stand there and twiddle our thumbs. Yeah, exactly. So number 2, Elia, you want to read text number 2? Right, very familiar text, actually comes from Leviticus. Jesus is often quoted as saying this, but he got it from Torah, okay? It's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment, right? And that comes right, actually, it's Kedoshim, it's the Parsha in the next couple of weeks. That is commented on in the Talmud by text number 3. Karen, can you read it?
What is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. That is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary. Now go learn.
Thanks. I couldn't resist putting those last couple questions. But I'd like to compare text number 2 and text number 3. What do they have in common, and how do they relate to each other? Are they the same?
Mirror images.
Say more, Tom. I don't need this now. Oh, I guess I do.
Love your neighbor as yourself is treat others as you treat yourself. The number 3 is things that you wouldn't want to happen to you. You don't impose that on others.
Mm-hmm.
So, two different ways of saying we're all equal in the eyes of God.
Great. Okay. Any other comments on juxtapositioning those two texts? Anything you notice? So, this arises from the question is, what does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? Does that mean that we just give everything up if we love our neighbor, right? Are we gonna, or does that mean, here, take my house, take my IRA, take it all? The question asked to the Talmud, is there a limit on love, right? Or what are the boundaries that we might put around that? And that's where, who is it, Akiva? Or is that, I think it is. Yeah, no, it's Hillel. Hillel, I didn't quote him, but it's Hillel. He goes, okay, no, where does it stop? Don't do to other people what you don't want them to do to you. That's the boundaries around that. Great. So, Glenn, you want to read number 4?
Those who seek rescue through you from an overlord, you are not to hand over to the overlord. Besides, you let them dwell among you in the places they choose, within your gates, wherever it seems good to them. Do not maltreat them.
So that comes right from Torah too, that's from Deuteronomy. And I think that we can sort of see how that has an application to people who are seeking refuge with us, right? Don't send them back. It would seem that the Torah is saying, protect them, offer them protection. Don't send them back to somebody who might be pursuing them. This next one is a very famous one and one of my favorites. Anybody see this one? Ben, you want to read this one from Pirkei Avot?
But not for myself, it will be for me. And when I'm for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, when?
Great. So this always comes in 3. Does anybody have any comments about the order of those 3? Why it would be that way?
We have to look at ourselves first,
Yeah.
and then
Why?
realize we're doing it for others.
Yeah. and not to delay on it. So a sense of, if I'm not okay, I can't be okay for anybody else either. Yeah, like, like when you get on the airplane and they say, make sure you put your oxygen mask on yourself before you put it on anyone else, right? I think also from like a psychological place, right? If we don't have a sense of our own self and our self-respect, or that we need to make sure that we're okay, how can we even begin to offer that to anybody else if we don't have a strong sense of what a person should, the boundaries somebody should draw around themselves? Is there anything else that strikes you with those three? Would you switch them around?
They're interchangeable.
How so?
Number 5, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not, like, I have to think about, so it's not now one, like, not now, it's a constant process.
So it's not just a rhetorical question, it's a real question. I'm saying, really, when?
Yeah, like, not now, it's not like, every day I have to be, not now when, and then, if I'm doing this for myself, why am I doing this? It's a constant circle.
This almost looks like the beginning of a argument, calculation. It says, if I'm not myself, who will be for me? It's almost like, I gotta take care of myself.
It does.
Could be interpreted as everything for me. And then step 2 is, well, no, it's not really happening. It can't be everything for you. You have to serve others. But
Right.
then where do you draw the line?
Exactly. I think in so many ways, this is like the question of life, right? We all wrestle with this every single day. The rabbis are really clear that it has to start with, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? And that goes for the Jewish people, that goes for ourselves, that goes for our family, right? If we're not taking care of ourselves, if we're not taking care of our family, we're not taking care of our people, who else is going to do it? Right? We have to be responsible for ourself, our health, our well-being, right? But then it's exactly that. So, and that has to be first. But the immediate after that, it's like, well, what are we? It doesn't even say, it doesn't say who will be. It says, what am I? If I am only for myself, for my own family, for my own people, it's like, am I even human? What am I? It's an existential question of, it's like, what do we put on this earth to do? If it can't just be about ourselves. Let's go to number 6. Karen, did you read one?
There are 4 types of character in human beings. One that says, mine is mine and yours is yours. This is a commonplace type, and some say this is a solid type of character. One that says, mine is yours and yours is mine, is a simpleton, an unlearned person. One that says, mine is yours, is yours, is a pious person. One that says, mine is mine, and yours is mine, is a wicked person.
What strikes you of that one? So, because that doesn't strike you as being pious? That's really a question. I want to understand what your comment.
I think it talks about abundance as well as misfortune. Right? I share in your joy and also your pain. It doesn't say pain here, but it all comes from God. So if yours is mine, because we're all part of the human beings, and this is talking about Jews specifically, we're all part of the Jewish people,
Nice. That's really sweet. Thank you, Ben. So you're thinking less about like property than about sharing in grief or misfortune or blessing or just having an openness in that way, and a compassion, really sort of feeling for other people. Is that where you're kind of putting it? Yeah. Yeah, I had a problem with that.
The one, mine is yours and yours is yours. It's like you own it. Yours is you have your own possessions, but like I'm joyous for you. Like mine is yours. Yours, what did it say? Mine is yours. Oh, mine.
Yeah, it should be and yours is yours.
Oh
Yeah.
Like my possessions are yours. You share mine, and you could also have your own. And I trust that there'll be more to be given.
And that you would receive in the same way. So it's very trusting that it would be reciprocated in that way. Huh. Yeah, I was curious about that word too, why the word pious was chosen. I thought it was also really interesting that the first one there, it said mine is mine and yours is yours, that was described as both commonplace, that's like would be typical, but that other people would say that Sodom and Gomorrah, that was Sodom is something it's not seen as complimentary. Any other reactions to that one?
Mine and yours is yours sounds like something that's separating people, not getting them together.
Could be, yeah. Right. But fences also make good neighbors. Right? So it's like there are healthy boundaries, right? And goodness knows, in our country as well as in Jewish tradition, there are, things like property laws and boundaries for that. Yeah. Let's read number 7. Who hasn't? Seth, can you read 7?
If a choice must be made between retrieving his own lost item and his father's lost item, tending to his own lost item takes precedence. Similarly, if one finds his lost item and his teacher's lost item, tending to his own lost item takes precedence.
Great. So 7, 8, and 9 go together. So this is from the Mishnah, which is a very, very old text. It's codified in about the year 200. So that's a basic sort of teaching. Is that surprising to anybody that a religious text would have it? Why? You're surprised by that? So that's a really good question, and I think we're going to see a couple of different texts that answer this, but also keep saying the same thing over and over again, but each one will give us a little bit more of an insight into what the rabbis are saying, why it's really important that we create boundaries for ourselves while not forgetting that we're in interrelationship with other people. So, hey Ben, you want to read the commentary, the Talmudic commentary on of that text number 7?
Rav says that the verse states, only so that there shall be no needy among you. The verse can be understood as a command, indicating that it is incumbent upon each individual to ensure that you will not become needy. Therefore, your property takes precedence over the property of any other person.
So what's this saying, right? We can't be so giving and so sharing that we lose track of our own sense of what we need and what is ours, lest we become needy and poor, and that we become a drain on the community, such that we have to then start asking for handouts. So it's incumbent upon us to ensure that we are okay, right? Just like that first Pirkei Avot, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And that once we're at that point, that we can start giving and doing for others. But let's read number 9, because that's Rashi's commentary on the Talmud. So Ben, did you read number 8? Or yeah. Okay, then Elia, you want to read number 9? This is Rashi's comments on number 8. So this is this teaching through the centuries. Thank you. What does this add? This adds a number of different perspectives. What are some of them?
You shouldn't share to the point of depriving yourself. But I would say there's enough to go around if we really learn how to share. I think if each of us looked at everything we possess, there's stuff we possess that we don't need, possibly not even you.
Okay. Yes.
Just got to figure out how to make a good use of that portion for others.
Other reactions to the Rashi? What does he bring up here? What are the different things that he brings into this conversation? Yeah, he's saying, you don't have to go the letter of the law, right? You don't have to say, this is mine and I'm not giving it away, right? That we can live charitably, but he throws in, he says, unless it involves an obvious loss to himself. It's like, unless it's an obvious loss, be open, be giving, right? Share, like kind of what Glenn says. Which part? Where it says, and if he always insists on this, right? Well, because, which part? Because if he's always insisting that the law says that what's mine is mine and I don't have to give it away, well, then he's ignoring his obligation to be charitable, and then he's ignoring his obligation to be kind and to be giving and to be sharing. So the law is saying you don't have to. You need to make sure that you're okay. But if you're taking that law to the letter of the law and you're not giving anything, then you're ignoring an ethical responsibility. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Is that what you were confused? That's confusing you? I kind of saw it as that you become so isolated about what's mine. You wind up like locking yourself up and your stuff up, and you becoming so like circling the wagons of your stuff, not giving anything away of yourself, internally, as well as your finances or your good deeds, that you then will become cut off from other people, such that eventually, you will impoverish yourself because you'll be so isolated. It kind of, what that kind of reminds me of? It's that when all of these bombings and stuff started, I don't even know when it was, everybody was saying, make sure that you have good relationships with all of the other churches around you and the police around you and your neighbors, because when, we might have the impetus to sort of shut down and not be in relationship with anybody, and that's the safest way to be. But in fact, the best thing to do is make sure that you deepen your relationships with people and that you're more interconnected with your community. That's what this sort of reminded me of, that, because the danger is in isolation. Financially? Yeah, I think that's probably the end result. This number 10 is usually brought up as the quintessential, theoretical, impossible situation, but teaches something really important. Tom, you want to read it?
It was tough. Two people were traveling, and one of them had a flask of water in his hand. If both of them drank, they would die. And if one of them drinks, he would reach settlement. Then the Torah expounded, it is better in such a case that both of them drink and die, rather than one of them see the death of his fellow. This was the accepted view until Rabbi Akiva came and died. The life of your brother is with you. This means your life takes precedence over the life of our fellow.
So what's this saying? Mm-hmm. You are under no obligation. Yes, and especially it's you've, two people, and one of them have a flask in his hand. You've got the water. There's nothing that says, as a matter of fact, it would be wrong to say that that other person's life is more important than your own. And is using a proof text of the Torah because the life of your brother is with you. This is how he is expanding this, how he's explaining this. No, but I see that as he's with you. Your life of your brother is with you, is that it's only when you're alive. With you. That's how I saw it. Did you have another way of taking a look of understanding that? I'm not seeing that necessarily in the texts. I'm seeing that that the primary responsibility is to ensure that we are whole and that our families are whole, our community is whole, and within that, we be as selfless as we possibly can. But that the default has to be, we have to make sure that we can sustain ourselves properly, and then give as much as we can from there of ourselves away to others. Yeah, Seth?
I can't understand. Rabbi Akiva came and taught the life of your brother is with you. This means your life takes precedence over the life of the fellow. Those seem like opposites to me. I can't see them. I can't make sense of the two.
You can't be alive. If you can't be alive, then why? It's saying that your life is to you greater. So if you've got the water, you drink it.
I don't know what he means by the life of your brother is with you.
I think it's like if there's two dead dudes, there's less of a chance to
That's a cosmic way of looking at it. You know, if both of them drink, then nobody has a life, right? Then neither one of them are alive. And if the other person drinks, then you can't be with the life of your brother. That's how I saw it. Is that surprising? That a religious text would stress the importance of making sure that one takes care of ourselves and our family first, or our community, or our country? Yes. Exactly. Exactly. You're under no obligation to give Karen the water, especially at the cost of your own life. It's not. It's not meant to be. It's definitely to prove a point, or to teach a point, and to, the relative value of life and obligation. Hmm. You see that in here? I'm not paying any taxes, don't do anything. But so I just want to get back to the nurses, though. The nurses aren't the exact same, though, because they don't know that they're going to die by staying with those babies. Yeah, no, they're taking a serious risk. It's not just looking at the. It's huge. It's horrible. Horrible. You mean the text on the other page? Yeah, I thought that was like brilliant, because that's what actually brings it in. It's like, yeah, we can be as selfish as we want. Anybody can be as selfish as they want, right? But that also means that you're missing the entire point of the balance of giving, of selflessness, of gimilut chasadim, of loving kindness, and of charity and being charitable.
As a lawyer, it's interesting to me that all the commentary and various definitions
Oh, I love this stuff. Let's just read through the other ones, and if anything strikes us as interesting, we can talk about it and then just like close this up. So who hasn't read? Glenn, you want? No, I think he's asleep. Ben, you want to read 12? No, read 11. This, by the way, is this is a text it's taken from other earlier sources. It doesn't come up just in the 12th century, but this is the theory of concentric circles of giving in Judaism, in terms of like where and how do you prioritize your giving and your doing.
Torah takes precedence to all others. Poor member of one township takes precedence over the poor of one city. Poor of one city takes precedence over the poor of another city. As it says, your poor may be brother in your land.
So, how does this strike you? Can you find a modern corollary to this?
We don't have, like, if you're a voting member in Jersey City, right, you can only vote here in order to affect social policy here. Like, even though you go down to Freehold, New Jersey, that's really nice there. No, right, and you see some homeless people there, you want to help, you can give donations, but you can't really affect homeless, you can't affect those social policies there, because you don't live there, you're not a member of that community. So you can only fix this here, and if it's good enough, maybe the people of Freehold will get wind of it and be like, let's do what they did in Jersey City.
Yeah.
To me, it's more about personal responsibility.
Say more. Say more about that.
You need to take care of your own house before extending yourself to others.
Exactly.
It doesn't say you can't
Right.
extend to others.
It takes what do you do first? What takes precedence? Exactly. So, our neighborhood homeless, taking care of our community, right? We give to that first before, if you will, like the starving people in Africa, right? It says, right, and if your brother-in-law doesn't have money to feed his children, you take care of your brother-in-law before you even take care of the homeless outside your city, in your city, right? It's saying, right, if you got a relation that is in need, that's your priority of giving, right? And then a poor member of your household takes a poor person over one that's outside the city. So if you've got somebody in your close circle, right, or in your immediate community that needs help, you help them before other people in the city, right? And you're of your own before even further out.
This one is the first one of the statements that has some nuance to it, really. It says precedence, priorities, as opposed to black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Keep the water for yourself. This one. More complex situations if you die.
Yeah. Yeah. Karen, you want to read 12?
If one person is able to save another and does not save them, he transgresses the commandment, neither shalt thou stand idly by the blood of thy neighbor. Similarly, if one person sees another drowning in the sea, or being attacked by bandits, or being attacked by wild animals, and, though unable to rescue him either alone or by hiring others, does not rescue him,
has a very famous passage. What can we take from this? Or does anything strike you from here?
There's always about having a responsibility to take care of others if you can. Again, this is a southern thing and western something else. When I get down to the end, old part, and I'm wondering if this applies to the people who aren't Israelites.
So this is always an interesting element of Jewish texts that comes up quite frequently, which is it will prioritize in many situations an Israelite or a fellow Jew. In modernity, people often feel most comfortable just eliminating that part and saying a person is a person. But we do have in our sources this idea of concentric circles, right? So do we ignore the fact that somebody is of our Jewish community? I mean, certainly in the time of Rambam, you could not. Jews were expected to be a completely self-sufficient community. There was nobody that was going to be helping us. If we didn't completely support ourselves, we would be just kicked out of the country. And it happened a lot. So there was very much in the culture that says, you know, you have to take care of, we have to take care of our community. We don't live in those kinds of communities anymore, but it does kind of go back to the question about, is Israel wrong for automatically taking Jews as instant citizens and treating non-Jews as refugees, especially given the history of the Jewish people in situations just like this, war, where all of a sudden we're displaced. Does Israel have an obligation to continue to just say yes to every single Jew that wants to come to Israel and move there? And does that mean they have the same obligation to people that are not Jewish? And what's the corollary for our country? Because nobody's just automatically American.
I haven't lived in Israel during the pandemic where there was not a lot of people coming in, and there were some Sudanese refugees, there was a good amount there. The country can't, it's so, and I was there and I was going to the visa center, like I had to go like once a month to renew the visa, things like that. And then I got like worker rights, so I don't need to do that for like a year or two right now. So to go back, I can't just walk in. But they don't have the resources. Like this is a country the size of New Jersey, and there was not a lot of Jews making Aliyah, there was maybe small amounts. But it was Corona, there's not a lot of people coming in. It's so hard. They don't have, there was lines, you know, for just me, you know, like right there. And there wasn't a lot of other people there. So it's really hard for a country the size of New Jersey to like take in. I don't know what your opinion was on this, but this is what I'm saying. It's like, it's hard enough to take the 5,000, 50,000 Jews that are coming in right now. You know, to process them, set them up, and like do all the paperwork and stuff.
I started saying that so far Israel's taken in 12,500 Ukrainians. 8,000 of them are not Jewish.
Yeah.
And people are complaining that they're talking about putting a cap on it. And so the question is, and the same thing for us, it's like, is it appropriate to put a cap on refugees? And if so, where is it? Yeah. And this is why I brought these texts. I want to read the last one, but I think it's a worthwhile, these are important questions to ask. You know, when do we? How do we? And you know, how much of what our comforts are and what we're accustomed to do we give up for the sake of kindness? And so is that question part of the conversation that we're having in terms of, is it too much that we're relying on our own sense of comfort? Why are we only taking a few hundred refugees in at this point? What can we offer? What can't we offer? And getting back to the, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Is it just everybody and everything, or is there a point at which we say we have to, draw circles around and say, and put criteria on? And when people are dying, are they different criteria from other times? So these are...
These refugee crises, that people end up in a country where they'll take them, Syrian refugees that end up in Turkey, a lot of them, Africa, other places, Middle East, refugee camps in Jordan, where refugees, and so the whole world contributes to keep them in Jordan, keep them in Turkey, keep over there. These people live their entire lives in refugee camps. And
Oh, yeah.
whereas in Israel or the United States, we don't have refugee camps, we have settlement camps maybe where they stay for a while, but we then absorb them into our society. Most places are not really prepared to do that.
Mm-mm.
Most places, unlike the United States, are really monocultural.
They're not as equipped to
Nice enough to let people in,
yeah.
and stay in a refugee camp.
Yeah, do you know that there are how many millions of Palestinians there are living in refugee camps and have been since 1948 not in Israel, but in Lebanon, in Jordan, and in Syria, because they have not absorbed Palestinians. Right, so they're still living in refugee camps since 1948.
It's under international law. Under international law, they have to be absorbed within 7 years. And they're purposely keeping them there for political reasons.
Exactly.
Look what happened.
It keeps the Palestinians as pawns. It's terrible. Let's do number 13 and call this a night. Seth, you want to read it?
It was for this reason that man was first created as one person, Adam, to teach you that anyone who destroys a life is considered by Scripture to have destroyed the entire world. And anyone who saves a life is as if he saved an entire world. And also, to promote peace among the creation, that no man would say to his friend, my ancestors are greater than yours. And also, so that heretics will not say, there are many rulers up in heaven. And also, to express the grandeur of the Holy One, blessed be he. For a man strikes many coins from the same die, and all the coins are alike. But the King of Kings, the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he, strikes every man from the die of the first man. And yet, no man is quite like his friend. Therefore, every person must say, for my sake the world was created.
This is just such a fabulous passage, right? This idea. So this whole thing is to say that's the whole purpose of knowing that there was one Adam, that there was one primordial human being, so that we can all say that nobody's blood is any redder, and that we have to make sure that we don't differentiate when it comes down to the important thing. Because we remember that saving one person, whoever they are, Israelite, not Israelite, is like saving the entire world. Taking a life is like taking the entire world. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed these texts. I think that they do that they offer as many questions as they do answers as to what are the things that we have to look at when we are thinking about giving and opening and how much and when when we're talking about life and death, and do we take into consideration, for example, Israel, when they're Jews or when they're not Jews, and for us, how is it that we consider, right? For the last 100 years, we would say, well, we'll let people in if they're not a drain on society. Can you do that in the same way in wartime as you can in peaceful times? And when can you put those criterias out there? Yeah.
I'm thinking now about the people who are criticizing the world for thinking of limiting non-Jews coming in. And that, why was Israel created in the first place? As a refuge for the Jewish people.
Right, who had no place else to go.
Those people, I assume American Jews who are criticizing,
Mm-hmm.
have we all have the privilege of living in an open society where we're protected and not persecuted. How would those people feel should that situation change?
Yeah, it's easy from the comfort of one's living room. It absolutely is. Anyway, thank you for exploring these with me. So just a final word on Esther and Purim from my friend and colleague, Rabbi Jeff Salkin. He was studying the text of the book of Esther, and he noticed the final words of the Megillah were really astonishing to him. He said, the last words records that Mordechai was popular with Rov Echav, which means the majority of his brethren. And that sort of stopped my friend Jeff in his tracks. He's like, wait a minute, hold on a second. He was popular with most of the people, not all of the people? I mean, he just saved all of the Jewish people, and still, he was popular with some of them, but not all of them. Boy, how real is this? What have you done for me lately? And now Rashi, quoting the Megillah, says that not everybody loved him. Why not? Because many thought that he occupied himself too much with community needs and neglected Torah study, and that he should have remained active in the Sanhedrin, the place of Torah. Then as now, you can't please everyone, especially in the way that we choose to allocate our precious and sacred time and resources. And this is the same, whether we're talking about an individual and how we spend our time and our money, how our Jersey City government allocates it, how our country allocates time and resources, and who it lets in and who it doesn't, and what it gives and what it doesn't. But in the book of Esther, we look at the relative safety and dangers of what it means to live as diaspora Jews, as you just shared with us, Seth. And the book of Esther forces us to ask these questions. What are our responsibilities in the diaspora? What are our privileges? The book of Esther asks us to look at the everyday masks that we wear to camouflage our identities. It looks at how far we go to pass in the dominant culture. It forces us to look at the cost to our souls when we pass, or we think we pass, in the dominant culture, and we forget who we are to our detriment and our history. And maybe this will serve as our necessary strength during these challenging times. Asking these questions, balancing these needs, balancing these priorities. And perhaps this is why the sages actually say that the Megillah is an epistle addressed to every generation, each of us, and that we need more courageous Esthers to speak up against racist authoritarianism wherever it's found and whoever it happens to be aligned with. So thank you for studying these texts with me and indulging us all in our ideas. So let's close this up with Aleinu. Let's rise 282.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגרי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
May all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. And then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. You can be seated.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Page 294, Mourners Kaddish. We are, if I read the name of your loved one, please rise in your place. We are observing the yard site of Frida Nemet and Herman Nemet. Is there anyone else who's observing a yard site or in their year of mourning? Have a name? Seth, you don't know how many we have on YouTube, or we did, do you? One? All right, then we're going to skip the indented line. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yalma divrach yerutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru. Amen. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal. Shmei dekudesha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran v'yalma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen.
May their memories always be for a blessing. Mercifully short announcements tonight. I'm sorry that went so long.
Effective immediately. We will now be mask optional for people who have submitted documentation that they're fully vaccinated. Ushers, thank you, Karen,
Thank you, Karen.
and school personnel will be verifying people's vaccination status upon entering the building. And by the way, thank you, Rabbi, for a lovely service and getting our minds going on a Friday night. Ben, thank you for the music, as always. Your little improvisations I always like. Our next Tot Shabbat is tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. for singing, dancing, story time, and other age-appropriate activities. We will be live and in person, right in the back of this very room, right? Yeah,
Front, back, a little bit.
front, back. And religious school will be in person this Sunday, also mask optional. The book club will meet next Thursday, March 31st at 8 p.m. to discuss Blondlocking in the Belgian Resistance. Frida Heller speaks by our own Mara Marian Gorowitz Kleinman, who will join us. She wrote the book, right?
Yeah.
Our in-person second night Seder will take place Saturday, April 16th at 5:30 p.m., led by Rabbi Morit in partnership with and at Temple B'nai Jacob down on West Side Avenue. More details will be available soon. With the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, we hope you will consider offering your support. You can find links in the weekly email for organizations that you can donate to. I'm always giving a shout out to Seth and an advertisement. So far, not so successfully, but we need people to join our tech crew. That means you. The tech crew that live streams our services. It's pretty much down to poor Seth, but he would be glad to speak with you and teach you how to do it. It's not so hard, and there are written directions. Also, our food pantry is open on Wednesdays, and volunteers are urgently needed. It's about a 1-hour commitment from 5 or 5:30 till 6 or a little after.
to help out the people in our neighborhood. We also need donations of food or money. You can do this and find out what's needed through the website.
Right, remember, we prioritize the poor of our city before the
poor of our neighborhood before the poor of our city, and
the poor of our neighborhood before the city, yes.
That's right. And we remind you to make sure to be careful crossing the street.
And the big news, the big news,
April
1st, Onegs are back as of April 1st.
April 1st, that's right.
And once a month, instead of an oneg, we're going to do a wine and cheese pre-neg.
A pre-neg.
Yes. So, onegs after
Wine and
service.
cheese.
Once a month, we'll do 7:15 pre-negs with wine and cheese. So, here, back in the sanctuary. Yeah. Down in the downstairs in the social, back there.
Not in the social hall.
That's the big news. All right, we went really long tonight, so we're just going to make a motzi and call it a night, shall we? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech